So I'm Zachary Barry. You might know me as Keegan's brother. I also work with Ian at UCF. So I'm not doing a technical talk. I'm doing a talk on Illustrator. Basically, I've used Photoshop for a number of years, and I keep looking on with envy at the people who know Illustrator. And every time I attempted to use it, I would get very frustrated and just give up and go back to Photoshop. So about a year or two ago, I decided, no, I'm going to sit down and figure this freaking thing out. So basically, I'm just here to show off what I've learned so far. I'm sure there's a few of you maybe that are Illustrator experts, in which case this presentation might be a little boring, but hopefully there's something that I have done that you didn't know about. And second, I would say a disclaimer is I've kind of just learned this off the cuff, so there might be a way I do something that's a little bit weird. With Illustrator, along with Photoshop, there's like a million ways to do everything, so just, I guess, take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, question?
What version are you using?
Oh yeah, I'm using Creative Cloud, so this is the very latest. Okay, so I just want to start off here. This is the final product. We got like let's say a client wants a postcard from Miami. The look is great for Illustrator because it's all very clean lines, basic shapes. So that's what I did it in. But I'm going to be going back and forth between that and my unfinished version, which I'm going to then live design so that it will closer match the final product. So just to get started, if we look at the final product, you see there's a cloud right here that I am missing in my version here. So that's what we're going to focus on first. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, you see kind of a similar concept. There's layers over here. Those layers can then have sublayers. So you can kind of think of these layers here as Photoshop groups, and then you dig down into them, and then you get the little layers that are inside with Illustrator called sublayers. So with that said, let me go ahead and click over here on the sun, on the cloud, and show you the first thing. So a lot of the magic in Illustrator, at least in my opinion, is basically using simple shapes and then merging or cutting them together to make more complex shapes. So you see the clouds, they're very simple designs, so we're going to mimic that with this cloud. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a few circles here. Okay. So we have our few circles, but they're not connected anyway. So what I can do is that I can hold on Shift and then select all of these. And then I come over to the Pathfinder panel over here. So this is where a lot of the power of Illustrator is contained. So I'm going to use the first shape mode here, which is called Unite. And when I click on that, it's going to merge those all together. So now I have one shape that I can, it's one piece. If I transform it, you see that. And I do not want to join Bright House Networks.
When you transform it, it brings up Bright House.
Yeah. Illustrator is very powerful, as you can tell. Okay, so it's looking good, but I've cut off the bottom of the clouds for a stylistic choice. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So it's a bit weird, but a lot of things you do in Illustrator is you can use shapes as guides or as tools to stamp out or cut out other shapes. So I'm going to do that with a square. I'll just make a simple square here. Then select both of those. And then use this other shape mode, minus front. So I click on that, and then boom. Now we have this cloud here that more mimics the final design of what we wanted. So I'm not going to go over all these shape modes in this presentation. You can play with those yourself, but I will try to touch up on them as I go through the thing that I'm doing, the talk. Okay, so next I come to these windows. We need to flush these out. You can see the final product. We have a bunch of windows here. So I'm going to zoom in on this one. We have a few pieces. We have the glass, a ledge, and then the shadow for the ledge, but they're not aligned. So I could click on this and then manually move it over, or I could click on it and then use my keyboard. But that's a little bit tedious if I want to line everything up. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to hold on Shift and select all of those items, and then I'm going to come to this other powerful feature, Align. So what I want is I want Align, horizontal align center. So when I click on this, it's going to line everything up for me automatically. However, if you notice what it's doing is it's actually taking all the elements and then kind of averaging them into one position. So if you see, everything is going to move. Let's say that I have my glass exactly where I want it. I kind of wanted the other pieces to move to match where the glass was. So what I can do is I can then click on the thing that I don't want to move once everything's selected. And if I do that, you'll see that it got a thicker line. So this is the way for Illustrator to tell us that this is the key object. So now if I click on Align, that's going to stay stationary, and then everything else is going to line up underneath it like I want it.
Which?
Yes.
You're a witch.
You're a witch. Okay, so now I have these things here, but I keep having to shift-click and select all of these. So it would be easier if I could group these together, which is exactly what I'm going to do. If I type Command-G, that will group them together, and then Command-Shift-G will ungroup them. Of course, it's in the menu and whatever, but you can group these. And so now if I select this, I select them all at once. I can move them all around at once. So I'm going to stop and then point out the tool panel that I've been using. Everything I've done so far is with this arrow, which is called the selection tool. I also want to show you the direct selection tool. So if I click on this guy, I will be able to click on each of these things in the group individually instead of having to select the whole group. Alternatively, if I select this group, I can then double click on it. I go into what's called isolation mode, and then I can edit these pieces separately. So both of those ways work fine. It's up to you. Okay, so we have our window here, but we need a lot more of them. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to align this window with this edge here, and I'll explain why a little bit later, but I'll just show you how to do it. With my selection tool, if I grab on this edge and then start to move it over here, it might be a little hard to see, but there's some green lines the Illustrator is showing me. So when those show up, it's telling me that these are snapped and these are exactly aligned where I want it to be. So I can use that feature to then put these where I want, and I know, because Illustrator showed it to me, that this is exactly aligned on top of each other. So now what I can do is I can copy this, paste it, and then I'm going to put it on the other edge. Whoops, wrong way. I'm going to put it on the other edge. And then I'll copy it 2 more times and put them arbitrarily anywhere. Okay, so now what I can do is I have these things, I know they're aligned on the edge. I can just maybe like use the keyboard and hit it a couple times as long as I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sure there's a little bit better way to do that, but that's a quick and dirty way. So I know now that these are the same distance from these edges. But my middle windows here kind of all haphazard all over the place. So what I can do is I can select all of those and then use another great feature, distribute objects. So I click on horizontal distribute center. It will then it'll keep these guys in the same place, but everything in between will be aligned and distributed equally. So I got these. Now I can group these as well. So you can have groups of groups of groups of groups. And I can copy these, paste them. And I can do the same thing the trick I just did, except I can do it vertically too. Vertical, there. And then of course I can group those. So now we have our windows. Okay, next we're going to go onto this tiny little boat in the background here, because it uses a lot of cool Illustrator features. So I'm going to make a new layer, a new sublayer in there. We'll call it boat. Okay, so you see on the final product that we have kind of a rounded rectangle here, but it's cut off at the top. There's 2 ways that you could go about doing this. The first way would be to use the rounded rectangle tool. So I can click on that. I'll make sure that it's going to be white so I can see it. And I'll just start to drag and make that shape. So this is how you make shapes in Illustrator. You already saw the circle, but here's the other shapes. Now, one thing about the rounded rectangle tool is while I'm drawing it, I can use up and down on the keyboard. That's going to change these, how rounded it is, which I had to just read on the internet to find that. I couldn't find that anywhere. So that's one way to do that. And then, of course, we can use our rectangle to cut, and we have a similar shape. But there's something that just came out in Illustrator, which this is why you should always listen to Adobe when they want you to update. Because I've avoided updating for about, I want to say 4 months, and then apparently this came out in January and I didn't know about it. But so there's this thing called live corners. So I'm going to make a square here. But then if I use the direct selection tool or the white arrow, you'll see these little grabby points on the corners here. So check this out. Say, what? So with this, I can just grab it and then define the how rounded I want it to, which is great. Because once, and the other way, once you draw that rounded rectangle, the old way I just showed you, it's kind of done. So it's lame. But the problem here is that it rounded everything. So real quick, there's a way for you to just select certain edges that you want to round. If I click off and then click on the anchor point close to the corner I want to round, it's going to show me just that nub. And I can hit down Shift and do it for the other ones too. And then it'll work like that. So we have the base here. Next, I'm going to make the staff. So these are simple square here. Okay, and so you see what happened is I'm not seeing it because it's actually on a layer behind. So if I just cut that and then select on this layer and paste it back, I should see it on top. So Illustrator, you kind of get, at least I get in a mess of all the layers, and it's kind of a little bit tedious, but if you just like click on the layer you're working on and paste, it should be close to where you want it. So I can then move this guy down so that it's aligned on the bottom of the boat, and then use what I showed you before to align that stuff up. So now I know that it's centered. So we're going good so far. If I go back, you can see that I have the flags and everything here. So I'll do those next. So there is a triangle tool. It's actually a polygon tool, but just to show you some of the other features of Illustrator, I'm going to draw this with just a simple square real quick. Like, let's say we'll do that. Again, on the wrong layer. Okay. Make it this post-it note yellow. But so I can also now use some of the pen features. So there's a delete anchor point tool. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to use that. It's also minus key. And then just click on this guy, and then boom. That one's gone. Now I have this perfect triangle shape. Another thing I could do is I could then use this white arrow, the direct selection tool, and then drag this anchor point up. Actually, I need to select the shape and then click on the point, and then I can move it. And I can move it to that center point, and it'll snap. But we have one anchor point too many here. We don't need it, so we can just get rid of that. So we have our shape here. Now I can just copy this, paste it, and then go to Transform Reflect, and it'll show you a little preview of what it's going to do. But if I vertically reflect this, then I have the same shape, and I can just make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so going good so far. If I go back, you see that these are kind of bowing out a little bit. So this is another new feature in Illustrator, is the anchor point tool, or Shift-C. So I can then, actually let me go ahead and select the shape I want. Yeah. So I can then use that tool, and if I get on this line, it shows kind of a little curve graphic. If I then click and then pull, it'll just bend that edge out, and then I get the same effect. So this is a lot of the cool stuff that you could do in Flash that you couldn't do in Illustrator, at least, or maybe it was already here, I just never knew about it, I don't know, but I like it. Next we're going to work on this flag. So you can see it's got a wavy effect, so I'll show you how to do that. It's very easy. First I'm going to add a point about the center here and get rid of these guys so I get the shape I want. But now I can go to Effect and Warp. There's a bunch of really useful warps in here that I can apply. So there's arc lower. You can look through all these. But we actually have a flag one, which is perfect. Thanks, Illustrator. So yeah, now I can change how much I want it to bend. I can distort in certain axes. But I'll just give it a subtle bend. Hit OK. So yeah. Illustrator likes to give me a lot of pop-ups, which I don't like, but that's just the way it is. Okay, so we have this flag. If I click on it, you see that the outline is still the original shape because it's non-destructive. So we still have that original shape. And to prove that, if I go to this Appearance panel, I can turn that off, or I could click on here and then go back and edit it. And another thing, just I don't know if you'll remember this, but if you go to Object, Expand Appearance, and I don't know why it's called that, but if you do that, it will then kind of apply that transformation, and now you see the outline matches, so it's a one-to-one now. Okay, so we got our boat. Let's zoom out. It's massive. So what we can do is, since I made everything in this one layer, I can just select on this little dot here, and that'll select everything in that layer, and then shrink it down to about where we want it. Oh, well, one thing I forgot are these waves down here. So this might be a little bit of a roundabout way to do this, but it shows another really cool feature of Illustrator that I want to show. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the inverse of those waves and then fill it in. So if that doesn't make sense, it will in a little bit. So just to help me out, I'm going to make these a bright color so I can see how they're different. I'm going to make a few circles. And now, so now I need to line these up. I can then do that. So here, let me show you this. Using the selection tool, I can grab this point and then move it over so that those circles are going to touch exactly. But this bounding box is in the way. So if I try to click on this point, it's going to start transforming it. But if you go to View, Hide Bounding Box, you can do that. I use this a lot, so it's Command-Shift-B. I hit that a lot. So Command-Shift-B gets rid of the bounding box. I can then click on this anchor point and move it. And then you can see that when it gets where these anchor points are exactly aligned, this, actually, there it goes. The arrow inside will turn white, and that's another way for Illustrator to say, hey, you're exactly matching these 2 points together. Not too far. So I'm going to just do that again. Okay, so I have my circles here, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle to complete this. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm kind of drawing these waves I have in this inverse area. So the next thing I need to do is select all of these shapes and use what Illustrator calls the shape builder. So if you're coming from Flash, at least designing in Flash, this is something that Flash does very well that now Illustrator can do. So if I click on this, now I can hover over any of these shapes, and it's gonna give me this dotted pattern saying, hey, you can make a shape out of this guy. But I can also do it in the negative space too. So if I click here, it's going to fill this in. If I hold down, I think Alt, it'll turn it into a minus, and I can then delete these shapes that I used to create it. And finally, I can use the eyedropper tool to then copy that color. And so then now we have our waves. You know, there's other ways I think you could do that. You could probably make a few triangles and then use the anchor point tool to kind of bend those in to mimic the same effect. And Illustrator even has wave warp effects that I could have applied to this, which is great. But yeah, so there you go. Okay, so I have about 2 minutes to finish the truck. So we'll just get started and see how far I can get.
Can it just look like a red Ferrari with the whip?
That's the best ice cream truck. Okay. So I'm just going to start drawing some basic shapes where I want the truck to look like. And again, I can then click on these and merge them with Unite. Now you see over here, the finished truck kind of looks like what I'm drawing, but it's slanted at the top here. So there's a few ways I can do that, but one way I wanted to show you was using the white arrow, the direct selection tool, and then use your keyboard. You can just transform that one point. That basically gets us what we want. It's a little bit low, so I'm going to raise it up. There. And now, since this is a simple shape, again, we can use our direct selection tool, use these nubs here, and then it's going to round all of these corners, which is great. Okay, so we got our basic shape. I'm going to go ahead and make it white, like the final product. Coming back, you see that we have this window that's cut out. And the angle of this window matches the angle of the outside of the truck. So I'm going to replicate that look. What I can do is I like to reuse my shape slot in Illustrator. So if I copy this and then paste it, and then I'll go ahead and make it a different color so it's obvious. But then I can kind of line it up where I want, maybe about there. Draw a few guidelines. Let me make that visible. And then again, select all of those items we just drew and use our shape builder to then add this guy. Actually, let me do subtraction. Subtract all of these guys out. So there we have our window. I can then select on this, and then use the minus front, and then come back to shape builder, and then add that negative space back. Now it's still there, it's just cut out like we want. I can then turn it black and drop down the opacity. I think the other one's 30. And then there we got the basics of the truck. And I'm out of time. So